Good evening. Welcome to the Southbridge School Committee meeting, December 12th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the McKinnon Council Chambers. Relative to Mass General Law 30A, Section 20F, and for the benefit of the public, this meeting is being recorded by both video and audio methods. Agenda item 2, pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you do the roll call?
Sure. Roll call. Today we have, let's see, Carla De La Cruz Davila.
Present.
Kathy LaPriori.
Present.
Andrew Murch.
Present.
Aaron DeMello. Present. Martina Shea.
Present.
John Shaw.
Present.
Steve Kabinski is not here today.
Okay. For those of you who are aware, Wally Mackenzie. My mother's maiden name was McIsaac, and I have trouble with McKinsey and McIsaac. I'm sorry. We lost him this past week, and I'd just like to have a moment of silence in his memory. Thank you. We have the October minutes to look at.
We have a couple of corrections.
Okay.
Under the DOE contract with Paul Thomas, I believe it should be will be talking to the community, not taking.
Okay.
And on the very last line, next meeting should be December, not
Oh, yes.
January.
We're just jumping ahead here. The next meeting will be January 12th, 2024. Yeah, and she even had the 2024, so it should be 2023. Okay. Item number 5 is Citizens Forum. Do we have anyone from the audience who wishes to speak? Please give your name and your address.
Hello, my name is Jessica DeChico, and I live at 83 Elm Street in Southbridge. I want to start by saying I'm so sorry for your loss. I also want to know if it's okay if I pass out my son's picture while I talk.
Yes.
All right. I'm a little nervous, so please excuse me if I fumble a little bit. Today I come with you about a very serious issue going on at Eastford Road School, so, all right. I first want to thank you, Jeffrey, for doing the allergy plan for my son and all the other students, so I just want to say thank you so much for doing that. A few incidents that have happened, which the superintendent is aware of. I have to send my son to school with lunch. The first time I ever sent him with lunch, I was outside and I saw him playing on the playground. I was just watching him, waiting to say hi. I got to see my kindergarten little boy just being carefree and happy on the playground. I proceeded to go inside to drop off his food. I got there at 10:30. I got back to my car at 10:35. I only know this because they go to lunch at 10:45, and I saw the teachers getting the students ready to go inside. My husband called me, and I put the phone on speaker where we were having a conversation discussing where I was meeting him because there was an emergency at his job. I was holding my daughter, and my son kept pointing at me that he saw me saying hi. I could see he was getting a little distracted, so I proceeded to get ready to leave. Kelly, the principal, came outside in this very disgusting verbal tone of voice, proceeding to angrily raise her voice at me if I was recording her students. I looked at her and I said, "What?" And then she said it again. "Are you recording my students?" I said, "My son is right there. I'm just saying hi to him." And then I kind of giggled and I said, "Let me guess. Did somebody in the office tell you that I was outside?" She said, "Yes." "That you've been outside for over a half an hour just standing with your phone recording students?" I told her, "No, I'm not on the phone. I'm not recording anybody. I just picked up the phone to answer my husband's phone call." Mind you, she's yelling at me in front of my 2-year-old daughter that I'm holding in my hand, who was diagnosed with anxiety. So she's squeezing my arm, crying, while Kelly is in my face screaming at me to get off the property and leave, and that I cannot record any students. She's yelling at me in front of my son, who is now staring at me, wondering why his mom isn't saying bye to him. And then she's yelling at me in front of his teacher, who I don't have a relationship with yet, and she's already damaged at that point. With the other 3 or 4 people that were standing outside, I was just being stared at. When that incident happened, that was it. I officially have lost my faith in that school. What Kelly did was disgusting and inappropriate. My advocate then emailed Jeffrey, and his only response was not to say sorry for me being completely humiliated in front of the entire classroom, or my son, or the teacher. All he did was copy and paste the handbook about how cell phones aren't allowed on the premises, only during activities which they're allowed to be recorded. And he pretty much okayed her behavior. Little did you know that I cried in the car after she yelled at me, because I just cannot believe what's going on. I don't know if you can see me, but I don't literally look like somebody that's just going to cry. As I mentioned before, my son has cerebral palsy. And unfortunately, he may never be out of diapers until he's 8 or 9 years old, because that's just what happens with kids who have CP and a disability. The first day of school, I asked for a diaper schedule by the nurse, Lisa, because I wanted to know what was going on when he was being diapered and whatnot. Well, I had called to ask for the schedule, which apparently got everybody mad. I was told by Kelly, "Jessica, it's the first day of school. Can we please get through the first day of school?" I don't care if it's the first day of school, or the first week of school, or the last day of school. I'm allowed to make sure his safety and well-being is being met on the first day of school. He cannot advocate or talk for himself. After that phone call was hung up with Kelly, with the principal, about an hour goes by and Karen calls me. And let me tell you, what she told me on the phone was something nobody ever wants to hear. She called me and said, "Jessica, I thought you were going to get your son potty trained. Do you want him to keep being an embarrassment in front of his peers and himself, that he has to keep going to the nurse's office to use the bathroom? We don't want him to be embarrassed or be an embarrassment in front of everybody else or around him." After that phone call, I called my advocate, who then called Karen, who then emailed Jeffrey, and I got no response from anybody about why that was okay for me to be told how to potty train my child, or the fact that Karen decided to call my son an embarrassment. A little 5-year-old boy whose picture I just showed you, who's going around. After that incident, I have emailed the school nurse over a dozen times about properly putting my son's diaper on and his pants. If you're a school nurse, I shouldn't have to call you or email you or have to pay my advocate to send you an email on how to properly put a diaper on. You're a school nurse. You should know how to do that. I shouldn't have to pay someone to tell you how to do that, nor put his pants on correctly. After my advocate emailed her over 12 times, which I have documented down, the school nurse decided to take it upon herself to tie my son's pants so tight that when he got off the bus, he was crying that the mean lady at school tied his pants so tight. I couldn't get his pants off. I had to cut his belt. I had to cut his string that was keeping his pants up, and when I took him off, she bruised my little baby boy's hips. He had 2 bruises on the side of his hips because she tied his pants so tight, as a retaliation for my advocate sending her the email about his diaper. That is not okay, to bully my 5-year-old child because you can't put a diaper on correctly. And I'm going to tell you this. I'm filing a civil suit with the school, as you already know. Something needs to be done. My 5-year-old child should not be bullied at the school. Neither should I. I can't even go to any activities or anything because every time I go there, everybody's staring at me or looking at me like I'm doing something wrong. I'm advocating for my 5-year-old child. And I don't want to file the civil suit, but this is at the point I'm at because you're not doing anything to help my child. That is all.
Thank you for sharing. Can I ask, are things any better now?
The only thing
Because,
I want to thank Jeffrey for is doing the allergy plan. And now I know my son is safe in there, which I don't know if you remember, I came in August and talked about that. So thank you for doing that, because not only are you keeping my child safe, but everybody else. So no, nothing's been okay at the school.
because the story you told us, I thought was about the first day of school, but things are still a problem?
Yeah, this is still going on, and my advocate has emailed Jeffrey and Karen and gotten no response. To the principal embarrassing me in front of everybody. Like, I got in my car and I cried. And I'm trying to hold back tears right now because I'm tired of my son being treated like this. It's not okay. I don't want to send him to school. He's 5 and he has a disability and he can't speak for himself at all. And the school nurse bullying my child, tightening his pants, or Kelly calling Karen calling my son an embarrassment. Why is she still working? She called my son an embarrassment. That's not okay. Something needs to be done. And if I can do anything about it, I will have everybody I know sign something to get Karen out. Because as far as I'm concerned, people do school choice to get out of here because of her and the school system. I don't want to move my child out of here. I don't have the money to move or the money to pay this advocate.
Yeah. All right, we thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for your issues. I'm sure that the administration and your advocate will work together to resolve these issues.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak in Citizens Forum? Anyone else who wishes to speak in Citizens Forum? Seeing none, we move to agenda item 6, Chairman's announcements. At this point, I have no really major announcements. Our major announcement is going to be that Dr. Villar is going to speak to us about the discipline problems and the discipline solutions that we have ongoing in our school. I do wish to wish the whole community a happy and blessed holiday season. Dr. Villar?
I'll go to the podium.
Yes, please.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully this microphone will stay up for us. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to speak with you about our efforts to improve climate and culture across the school district. I know that individuals like to refer to discipline, but we are focused on creating a preventative environment that's positive and supporting is the concept that we try to put forward. I would like to thank Dr. Williamson, the elementary school director of elementary education, and our district social emotional learning coordinator, and Mr. Jeff House, the secondary director of education, for joining me this evening. Each of them will speak to aspects of our presentation tonight, and then we'll try to answer questions that folks may have about our presentation. Our model is based on a system called multi-tiered systems of supports. Essentially, it is a multi-tiered system that seeks to provide support to children in the largest, or I guess the closest place to the classroom in our school system. So if you see the triangle, we have 80% or so of students who typically are instructed in a normal classroom, and we refer to that as Tier 1. Normally, Tier 1 activities can support their instructional needs, and they can be very successful in school. Some students will need additional supports, and we refer to that as Tier 2, and you'll see that as like 15% of students across any normal distribution, and then 5% of students are at the top of the pyramid. We refer to that as Tier 3 in multi-tiered systems of supports, or in the PBIS framework, which we'll speak more to in a little while. And those students will need the most impactful types of interventions, and we'll get into an explanation of what some of those interventions are as we move along. All this is created with a universal design type mindset, trying to create a school environment that meets all kids' needs, taking into account things like situations of poverty or students who might be suffering from trauma or other background issues that can interfere with student learning. So we try to create a scenario where that kind of happens as the normal state of events, allowing again for our mainstream to support the greatest number of students. I do want to be clear, all these systems that we're going to talk about tonight do not mean that we don't have disciplinary action in schools. When you're creating an environment that's supportive of students, you need to be explicit in your instruction and supportive of correct and positive behaviors and positive actions on students, but you also need to provide corrections as well. So we're not talking about a scenario where students are not disciplined in schools. As we created our budget going into this year and over the last few years, we have been investing in positions that allow the school district to be better prepared to create a positive environment that's supportive of student learning and to meet student need. And so you'll see here on this slide where we have not only increased the capacity of school administration, and people often think of just a principal and assistant principal, but we've also added to our schools individuals called deans of students who do help assist with classroom disruption and help reset or help students get back on track. Adjustment counselors, who are folks with mental health background and help provide counseling to students and also help students in crisis in our schools. We have folks from an organization called City Connects who also have counseling background at work in our schools and help us create community connections wherever possible. We have board certified behavior analysts or BCBAs that work in our schools and help us kind of troubleshoot and develop systems to support specific students who are having trouble. Applied behavior analysts assist our BCBAs in working again in our systems to support children in schools, and we have guidance counselors established throughout our schools. So all in all, about 20 FTEs, and I will point out this slide was corrected, so the copy that I sent to the school committee in advance for preparation had 18, I believe. We did our math, we actually have added to that. We also have invested in materials like curriculum for elementary schools. One, for instance, is called Second Step, which helps teach children how to manage their emotions and respond appropriately in different contexts. We have intervention programs you might hear a little bit more about, like check-in, check-out intervention, which is a point-based system that kids carry throughout the day. Again, we provide small group and individual counseling to students. We have worked to create a relationship with an outside organization called Cartwheel that provides remote therapeutic and counseling services for students who are having difficulty. We currently have about 57 students out of 80 slots utilizing those services. We work with a group called the School Empowerment Network who helps train us both in restorative practices and help support our measurement of school climate across the district. Actually, I'm going to steal the thunder. I should introduce Dr. Kelly Williamson, the Director of Social Emotional Learning and Elementary Education here in the district. She'll speak specifically to you about positive behaviors, interventions, and supports. And then, when she's complete, she will pass it on to Mr. House, and then I'll come back and finish the end of this presentation. So, Dr. Williamson.
Thank you, Dr. Villar. It's nice to be here and nice to see you all today. So implementing PBIS across our schools is one of the most important things we do in establishing and maintaining a positive school environment for all of our students. And across all of our schools, we have key features in place to make sure that we're implementing PBIS the way it's intended. The foundation of PBIS is the instruction. So students are provided with explicit instruction around what behavior should look like in the classroom and throughout the school building. That instruction involves modeling by the teacher. Students often have the opportunity to model for their peers as well. And then what's really critical is that all of our students have opportunities to practice the expected behaviors and receive feedback. And this instructional cycle continues until teachers see that students have made these expected behaviors habits. So it's not something we just do once. We make sure that students are comfortable and familiar with those expectations before we move on. Another aspect of the classroom management piece of PBIS is acknowledging student behavior through behavior-specific praise. And that's a way that we are able to ensure that students know when they're doing a good job. Students want to know when they're doing a good job. And so we're reinforcing the meeting of those expectations, and you're also have a likelihood that those meeting those expectations will continue when you're providing that praise. In the classroom, we look for a praise to correction ratio of 5 to 1. Like Dr. Villar mentioned, we don't just praise and we don't just acknowledge the good things, we have to correct. Correcting mistakes is part of the learning process. And so we look for that praise to correction ratio to be 5 to 1. It contributes to an overall positive environment in the classroom in the school, while also providing students with the instruction that they need. Each school also has a set of core school values and behavior matrices, and I'll be able to get into those in a few slides in more detail. But that's the foundation of the instruction that the students are provided, is around the values that the school adheres to and the behaviors associated with those values. When we have this preventative model in place, most students are going to meet expectations most of the time. When they don't meet those expectations, we have systems to collect data around those incidents, and we use that data to make decisions around school-wide practices and supports that students might need to be successful in school. Another part of each school's implementation of PBIS is celebrations. We celebrate individual students. A lot of the schools have students of the month who are consistently demonstrating positive school behavior. All of the schools have opportunities for students to earn points for PBIS, and they're able to use those points to trade in for things at the PBIS store at school. They can get things from toys and books to experiences like lunch with the principal or an opportunity to read a book to another classroom. And that's just another way of motivating students and rewarding them for the good behavior that we see. PBIS is part of our multi-tiered system of supports for students. So what we have at each school is a Tier 1 PBIS team. They coordinate all of those systems that are put in place to support all students. They monitor the curriculum implementation, and they look at the data across Tier 1 to make sure that we're implementing the way that we intend. Each school also has an advanced tiers team, and that team looks at data in order to identify students who might need additional supports beyond that Tier 1. The crucial element of all of this is the data that they're able to access and use to make decisions around school supports and individual student supports. This slide gives you some insight into the data that we have access to when we're looking at behavioral incidents. The screenshot on the left is data that comes from our Student Support Center dashboard. And Mr. House will get into that in more detail when he presents to to the school committee. But this is an opportunity for students, if they are struggling with behavior in the classroom, they're emotional, and they're not able to regulate within the classroom, they have this space where we have counseling staff to help them regulate and then get back to the classroom. This data is broken down for us in ways that we can use it really strategically to support students. The screenshot that you see is an overall snapshot of a school, and we can use that to look at things like, is there a certain time of day when students are struggling? Is there a day of the week that students are struggling the most? Is there a location that's problematic? And we can make school-wide decisions based on that data. Another feature of that particular dashboard is that we can click on an individual student, and then all of the data on that screen will be just for that student. So if we have concerns about a particular student, we can look and see, is there a certain time of day? Is there a day of the week? And again, we can address that student's needs specifically. The data on the right side and those screenshots come from our PBIS Swiss system. And that is a system where if a student is struggling with behavior and not meeting expectations, we enter that data into the system. And that just allows us to collect really accurate information about what's happening in our schools and where we might need to either make adjustments or put supports in place for students. The Tier 1 PBIS team will look at these graphs and they'll make determinations about, as a school, do we need to make some changes? I was at a school recently and we noticed that there were spikes at certain times of every day, and we associated that with kids coming in from recess. So this week, that school has been working with kids to review that lesson plan around calming before we come into the classroom. So it's a way for us to understand what's happening in our school and then react in a way that's going to support our students. Our advanced tiers teams can use this information, again, to identify students that might need supports beyond that Tier 1 implementation. Another part of our preventative model is universal design for instruction. And one of the things that I find really similar between universal design and PBIS is clarity for students. It is our responsibility to be incredibly clear about what we expect for students, and universal design does that not just for the behavior piece and the expectations, but also academically. Universal design ensures that the environment is predictable and consistent for our students. So no matter where they are in the school, no matter what adult they encounter, the language is going to be similar. They'll be acknowledged if they're meeting expectations, and they'll be corrected in a predictable way if that's the case. Also, like PBIS, in the classroom, students are explicitly taught and coached on academic skills and habits. Anything from keeping themselves organized and their materials organized to how to stay focused. And that is done through really intentional teacher monitoring of the classroom. And specifically with directions. We make sure that teachers are breaking directions down so that students are able to keep up and understand what's expected of them before they move on. So in a classroom, you'll typically see a teacher give a direction, monitor the class to see, provide praise, make corrections if needed, and then move on to the next direction and repeat that process. And all of these things combined help to prevent frustration on the part of the student. The behavior matrices that I referred to in PBIS is a way for us to take some of these core values that our schools have and adhere to and make them concrete and specific for our students so that they know what those things look like in different areas of the classroom and the school. So in our classrooms, you're going to see matrices in different areas. They might have expectations for whole group instruction, expectations for small group instruction, morning meeting, things that happen within the classroom. And then we also have matrices throughout the school building, so hallways and the cafeteria. And these are the foundation of all of the instruction that we provide for students. And you'll see the values that we have at our elementary schools are all the same. They all have the same 3 values. And then our students that when they get up to the secondary have some more sophisticated values like professionalism and integrity. And those can be abstract if you don't clearly define them for students. And they can also look different in different areas. So safety in the hallway is walking in the hallway. But out at recess, kids want to run around. So that's going to be a different definition. And so we're very specific about how we teach these things to our students in different areas of the schools. Now, this matrix is an example of one that you might see at Eastford Road School. That's the school where we have our preschool, kindergarten, and first graders. And you can see the values along the left side of the grid. And then to the right side are very specific examples of what those values look like behaviorally. At Eastford Road, our students are just learning how to read, so they have a lot of pictures associated with it, because the teachers not only use these matrices to instruct, but they refer to them all the time when they're reminding students of expectations. So this is accessible to our ERS students because they don't have to read a lot of text. The matrices on this slide represent ones that you might see at Charlton Road School or West Street School. Again, the values are the same and they're all along the left side, but there's more text and there's a higher level of detail around the expected behaviors. These matrices address, you can see that the ones that are not classroom specific but throughout the school. And what's crucial about the way that these are instructed when it's not in the classroom is that students actually go to those locations for the instruction. So if they're practicing how to go through the cafeteria line and then find their seat in the cafeteria, they're actually in the cafeteria. They're not just talking about it, but they're in there and they're practicing and getting a feel for what it's like when they have to do that independently. And this is an example of one of our lesson plans for an expectation for one of our locations outside of the classroom. These are critical to the planning that our building leaders do over the summer. They go through these lesson plans and make sure that they are still relevant and they still match the expectations for each of these locations. And then they create a very specific and detailed schedule for teachers and other staff to instruct these in these locations at the start of the school year, so that we make sure that students get off on the right foot when they are reacclimating to the school year. We revisit these lesson plans throughout the year. Sometimes it's based on data, like the example that I shared earlier. And we also revisit these lesson plans after a school vacation. So all of our Tier 1 PBIS teams right now are working on their January plans to revisit these when students come back after a longer break. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Mr. House, and he's going to share more information about the secondary implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Williamson. Good evening.
Good evening.
To the school committee, and good evening to the community. Thank you, everyone, for just taking this time to let us have this opportunity to speak and share about things that we're doing in our schools. So I'm going to talk about what we do in our secondary schools. I'm Jeff House. I'm the Director of Secondary Education. The past 3 years, I was the principal of Southbridge Middle School. This year, I have the pleasure to work with the high school students as well. I've really enjoyed my time being here in Southbridge. Hope to be here for a while. I love working with the kids here. They're showing us every day that when we have the right supports for them and we give them the conditions they need for learning, they can do great things. So we have great kids in this town. So the things we do in the secondary schools are really the same strategies, essentially, that they do in the elementary schools. It's just scaled up to meet the needs of kids who are older or in the high school, even young adults by the end of their high school time. So these examples here are examples of behavior matrices that we use in the middle school and in the high school. Like Dr. Williamson said, we base all the expectations in the building around our core values. So in the middle school, we talk about our STAR core values, STARR, safety, teamwork, achievement, respect, and responsibility. We know it's not the right way to spell STAR. Don't worry, we teach correct spelling, but the 2 R's are important. In the high school, it's based around pride, because one of the rallying cries of the school is Pioneer Pride. That's right, go Pioneers. So we wanted to play off of that. And at the same time, each letter represents something. So our 5 core values in the high school are professionalism, respect, integrity, discipline, and excellence. And so the one on the left is a bathroom matrix for the middle school. So we define what is safety, teamwork, achievement, respect, responsibility. Doing the right thing, what does that look like if you're using the restroom? There's also one for the cafeteria. There's one for the hallways and stairwells. There's one for the auditorium. Wherever you are in the building, there's a way to carry ourselves with STAR core values or with Pioneer Pride. Or the one on the right is an example of the Pride matrix for the classrooms. There's one of those in every classroom in the high school. We also, like Dr. Williamson said, it's important to teach these expectations to students. So this is an example of how we define the STAR core values for the middle school students. You'll see these posters around the school. When we present the monthly STAR Student of the Month awards, it's based around students who are role models of these. So safety means following school rules and safety procedures. Teamwork we define as getting along with classmates, teachers, and staff and helping others when needed. Achievement we define as doing your personal best and showing academic growth. Respect we define as treating others as you would like to be treated. And responsibility as attending school regularly, prepared with school materials and a charged Chromebook, and actively participating in class. So these are just overarching expectations for all times of day. At the high school, we have the same thing. We define what does professionalism mean. It's about participating appropriately, meeting expectations for dress code, conduct, use of technology. Respect is about interacting positively with classmates, teachers, and staff, treating others as we'd like to be treated. Integrity, we define as being honest, doing the things that are expected of us even when no one is looking, accepting the consequences of our choices. Discipline we describe as striving to meet our responsibilities on a daily basis, and if work is challenging, to persevere, work hard, give our best effort. And excellence we define in terms of knowing our personal goals for academic and social growth and working hard to achieve those. So those are the values that inform everything we do in our secondary schools. These, along with this, like Dr. Williams said, there's specific training we give to teachers around classroom management and how to positively support behavior in the classroom. This is an example of one of the slides from the training we give to teachers in the middle school. We'll see a very similar one related to the high school. I can talk a little more about it then. We try to do as many things as possible to celebrate positive behaviors. So like Dr. Williamson said, we orient students to the expectations, and we'll do a reorientation just like the elementary schools in January coming back from vacation. We celebrate our STAR Students of the Month in the middle school. The middle school has monthly grade level assemblies where there's awards, recognition, celebration. There's a weekly community time in the middle schools where we teach social and emotional learning activities and team building and empathy. There's something we call our MVP awards, class by class or every week in each class, teachers give out awards to students that have just done great work in those classes that week. We have classroom circles, so community circles. We use them for community time on Wednesdays, but also for restorative conversations. Like if someone has not lived up to the norms of the community, it's a chance to have a conversation, repair that, rebuild relationships. And we try to put out a lot of positive things about the school. We're really proud of the improvement that's happened in the last few years, especially in the middle school, and we want to get the word out. And we're just really proud of our kids. I know parents like to see their kids recognized on social media when they've been successful, and it's just good for the community to see good things happening in the schools. And we also have monthly spirit days in our schools just for fun. Fun is part of creating a positive climate. The high school is similar. We also orient expectations. We do student awards. Sometimes they're a little more serious, like we just had a breakfast to recognize our John and Abigail Adams Scholarship Award recipients. So there's maybe it's a different kind of celebration and recognition in the high school, but it's still very important. We have grade level assemblies and pep rallies. The pep rallies are big in the high school. And we're also trying to increasingly this year get more word out about the positive things happening in the high school on social media. The reason we do as much classroom management training as we do with teachers is because we want to positively support students to meet behavior expectations in the classroom so that students are in the classroom. We don't want students to be out of class. We certainly don't want them to be out of school. So the more teachers can positively engage students in the classroom, the more students can remain in the classroom without disruptions to learning. So we train teachers to explicitly teach and reteach expectations, use lots of reinforcement of those expectations whenever possible through praise, putting the spotlight on kids doing the right thing. Dr. Williamson talked about the universal design. We try to keep expectations similar across classrooms and to teach the expectations in a way that all students can meet the expectations. And so by doing this, the idea is so that, like Dr. Villar said, 80% or the vast majority of students can succeed in Tier 1 and don't need additional supports. But for those students who need additional supports, we also provide those. Some examples of some of the this is an example of some of the things we teach in orientation to make expectations very clear. So in the secondary schools, there are only certain locations where students can use cell phones so that they're not a distraction. That's in the middle school, that's at lunchtime or before, after school, or on the bus. In the high school, it's those same times, but also during transitions, as kids get a little more freedom and self-monitoring of their technology use as they get older. We're clear about dress code. We are clear about what is respectful and appropriate language in the schools, expectations just for respect. And so, the more we teach those expectations, the more kids are able to meet the expectations. We also talk about just our teachers having the right mindsets to be leaders by example and leaders for our kids. So we always want to have more positive reinforcement of kids doing the right thing than corrections of kids not doing the right thing. Positivity is just important for our kids to grow, build confidence, and build skills. We encourage our teachers and coach our teachers and ask our teachers, even if a student's not making the best behavioral choice, to always keep a positive or neutral tone when we're coaching students around behavior so that they know that we care and we want them to be successful. We talk about the warm, demanding balance. Warm means like our kids need to know we believe in them, we care about them, we want them to succeed, and it's about acknowledging them, making them feel seen and praised when they do the right thing. And then the demanding part is about also having high expectations for them. Like I said, Southbridge students can do great things if we have high expectations for them. And then we just want to be consistent so that 100% of our school-wide rules are the same across our classrooms. And they always apply 100% of the time for 100% of students, and we expect 100% of staff to be role models of them as well. And the more we're consistent like that, just the more I think our students buy in and can succeed. So these are some of the specific moves we coach teachers to use in the classroom. The first and most important thing is giving really clear directions. Students just need to know what's expected from them all the time. The second thing is just active monitoring, so our teachers just being, not behind their desk, but actively monitoring the classroom, circulating, our students knowing that we care that they're doing the right thing and are actively monitoring to make sure they do. And then we really emphasize specific praise. So when students are doing the right thing, they should very frequently in every classroom be acknowledged by name and praised for it, to know exactly what they're doing right. So telling them exactly what they're doing right. That is the most powerful way to make other students want to do the right thing and to motivate students to want to keep doing the right things. And then if we ever do need to redirect students who are off task or not meeting expectations, we want to do that also in a very consistent way. So our students know they're always just going to get one simple reminder. Remind them by name, like, hey, here's what I need you to be taking notes right now. Or remember, voices are off during independent reading time. And then the second time, giving them a choice, like, hey, I'm speaking to you about this again. If I need to speak to you a third time, you might earn a minor referral, like what Dr. Williamson was talking about, that we put in Swiss so we can track that data and know which students are struggling. And if that ever happens, we call home, we let the parent know. And then the last part I'm going to talk about is, at times, there can be behavior in the classroom that either becomes disrespectful to other students or to staff, or that becomes disruptive of the learning of others, or that is not safe. And obviously, for students to learn, the first thing they need is to be safe, and for teachers to teach, they need to be safe. Everyone in our school community deserves to be respected, and our students' learning is so important that we don't want it to be disrupted. So those are the three times, the only three times we want a student to have to leave the classroom due to behavior, if it's disrespectful, unsafe, or disruptive. So again, this just kind of lays it out. But what we really emphasize to our teachers is something like removing a student from the classroom. We look at that as kind of the last resort. The most important thing is being really clear with our expectations, really positive in how we reinforce those expectations, and really consistent in just showing our students we believe in them and will never give up on them. And that's what's made the most difference in our school climate over time. And then just so that everyone knows, we have a space in each of our schools. It's called the Student Support Center. Sometimes it's referred to as the SSC for short. And that's where a student can go if they do need to be removed from the classroom because it's either disruptive, unsafe, or disrespectful to a member of the community. So we coach our teachers how to make that call, just to make the call quick and matter of fact, so students aren't, we're never trying to embarrass students or make a big deal of it. Just, have that student leave the classroom so we remove the disruption, and then so we can support that student more outside of class. Because we don't want our teachers to be too much with one student's challenges in the moment because they have 20 other students to teach, but we do want to help that one student. And so we emphasize someone from our SSC team getting to the classroom quickly, just get a real brief explanation from the teacher, take the student out of class so that the class can continue, but then we can support that student outside of class. And then the last thing I'm going to share is what happens if a student does go to the SSC. So the first thing is just to make sure everyone's safe. So if a student's ever leaving class because they're upset or they're escalated in some way, we just want to support them to de-escalate. Then we always review expectations with the student about what happens in the SSC each time they visit. We call home to let parents know that the students have visited the SSC that day. The SSC is a quiet space, so we expect the space to always be quiet, so it's a calm, reflective space. Students turn in their cell phone, they have a seat, they write what we call a behavior reflection, where they just answer some questions like what happened in class, what could you have done differently, do you need any support? And then someone from the staff reviews that with the student. Then we give them something academic to do after that, just so they make best use of their time and show they're ready to get back to class and do work. And then a very important part of it is we keep the same mindsets in the classroom, in the SSC that we want to have in the classroom, which is that same warm, demanding balance. We care about you and we have high expectations for you, keeping it positive and keeping very consistent with expectations. And if students are having the SSC, we want to take them back to class and make sure they're successful. So we don't just send them back, but we always go back with them, have someone from our staff go in with them for 1 to 2 minutes, make sure the teacher acknowledges the students so they feel welcomed back into class, make sure they have their materials, know what to do, get oriented back into the lesson, and when we see them learning again, then we step out and they're back in the flow of the day. So I hope that wasn't boring or too much information, but those are some of the things we're doing in the secondary schools and in our elementary schools as well. They also have a student support center to support our students every day. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. House and Dr. Williamson, for your support and help in this presentation thus far. As you can see, I brought them because they both have a depth of knowledge and are quite dedicated to the work. So again, we were talking about multi-tiered systems of supports. The concept is we're trying to help all students in our classrooms, but providing extra supports for kids who need them at different tiers and different levels, and really focusing resources where they need to go so that we can make as many students as successful in any given day as possible. Of course, there are times when students are not successful in SSC, and we have situations where students require more extreme discipline in our schools. I mentioned earlier, we still utilize all aspects of discipline. So there are in-school suspensions that could be issued, short-term suspensions, less than 10 days, or long-term suspensions, more than 10 days. In real extreme situations, an expulsion can be applied. That's particularly in the case of possession of a weapon or a significant assault and injury or a significant amount of drugs, for example. Obviously, we don't like to have any of these scenarios. There has been a lot of shift in the regulations of schools over the last 10 to 15 years around suspension. I think universally we've all recognized that when students are suspended from school, it removes them from the learning opportunities. It often compounds difficulties that the child is having. When they return, they're further behind. Often behaviors are a form of adaptation or resistance on the student's part to some difficulty that they're having. And so we're compounding problems by suspending kids out of school. So we work very hard to try to limit that to only those scenarios where really there's not much more that can be done in school. Because ultimately what I'd like to see as a policy is to have that number as absolutely as small as possible. And we want to raise student achievement. They have to be with us. But the laws and legislation certainly have been guiding us and supporting that philosophy. And I think it's really important for people to understand that there are actual specific legislative scenarios that administrators have to follow when making that decision if a student is going to be suspended from school. So for example, it has to be a serious or egregious violation of school rules where we consider that if the student remains, the situation is still going to be unsafe. It could be that this disruption has happened to such a high level in the school that, again, their student remaining simply is not tolerable at that moment. But we have specific paperwork and procedures now that administration has to follow, review, hearings that they have with families, they record them, and there's an appeals process too. So it's all legislated and all dictated by state policy and regulation. We've had quite a few instances where students have to be suspended from school. Often in these cases, we're talking about a scenario where it's really not safe if a child is refusing to follow redirection from adults and unfortunately like this year, leave campus. We can't have it. And so in those instances, essentially, our hands are tied and we have to go to this extreme. Our preference is to have students utilize our SSC process, work with our adjustment counselors, work with their teachers, have a restorative conversation, and stay in school. So that's ultimately the goal. I did take a look at our suspension numbers, and this is something that I think is really important for everyone to understand. Dr. Williamson shared some of our data systems. We have very elaborate sets of data, and so does the department. And we look at these data, and we're training our teachers through our positive behaviors interventions and supports teams, PBIS teams, to look at these data, because following the data helps you to identify whether or not there's One group of students are being suspended too often than another group of students, if there's a certain part of your environment in your school that needs correction, if you're overutilizing one type of suspension, not finding ways to solve problems by maintaining students in school and working with families, like all those decisions can be monitored through these data. So if you take a look here, this screen, I went back to the 2018-19 year just to gauge the high school suspension rate for this year. Because I'm aware people think the high school had 12 suspensions on day one. It must be out of control. They must be suspending 12 kids a day every day. It's not the case. It's not where we want it to be, but it is certainly not out of line from where it historically has been. It will be better. When we look at our middle school, I would draw people's attention to 2019-2020, when we had 846 days of suspension with 79 events between the 1st of school and the 15th of November that year. All these data cut off at November 15th. This current year, there have been 15 events in that same time period. Dramatic reduction. And more important even is the nature of what we now call a disruption in the middle school versus what used to be called a disruption. I spend a lot of time in all of the buildings, and it is a strong academic environment. I know recently some members of the school committee saw the middle school. It is an absolutely strong, positive learning environment. That's our target for all of our schools, is to use the SSC, our PBIS processes, everything we've talked about tonight, to create environments that are supportive to kids, that prevent us from ever crossing the need of a suspension. We know that's not a good result for anybody. So certainly, if we look at the past as a predictor of the future, what we've been doing at our middle school is producing excellent results, and we are now replicating that effort in the other half of that building at the secondary level. I mentioned the School Empowerment Network does collect some data for us, and so there's a consultant that goes to classrooms for us, and he's pulled together these metrics to help us understand from their perspective how things are going. And so this slide is the middle school's classroom culture data gathered by SEN. And what I draw your attention to is if we go back to the lower half of the screen, 21-22 school year, the positive learning environment was a rating of a 3.41 on a 4-point scale. On task, 85%. Active participation and engagement, 25%. We fast forward to school year quarter 1, 23-24 this year. We've more than doubled our active participation. The on-task rate is almost 100%. It's at 97%. I misspoke. It's a 5-point scale, 4.08 on our positive learning environment. Some significant growth. And that is a trend that took years to build, and they're building on that. At our high school, we've been collecting these data for the same period of time. And I guess the bright spot I can share in these is they certainly lag behind the middle school. But what we have seen is from quarter 4 of last year, where we really dug in to make some significant changes in the school, we're seeing that those data held through quarter 1. And our expectation will be to see improvement as we go across this school year. We are now in quarter 2. Things are underway, and certainly in my visits every week in the school, we are seeing progress. So it's a lot of work to change the culture of a building, but it's important work. Our students deserve it. Every child should go to school and have an outstanding learning opportunity every day, and they should be presented with great classroom spaces that are safe and supportive, where they do feel comfortable. So at that point, I'll conclude our comments, but I'm certain there'll be questions. We'll be happy to do our best to try to answer them.
Mr. Murch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Referring to the staffing levels of the various, like Dean of Students, adjustment counselors, I see that we have applied behavioral analysts. We got 4 at Eastford Road and 2 at Charlton Street, and we don't have any at West Street as far as the ABAs. I'm just wondering why we have 4 in one school and 2 on another, and we can't spare one over to West Street.
It's really about the programming that they're supporting. So ABAs are assigned specifically to programs where we're working with students with autism in general. So we have those students right now at ERS and over at Charlton Street School. West Street has our High Roads program, which is behaviorally challenged students. So it's a slightly different approach there. They do have BCBA support.
All right.
I would tell you that if it was a resource that they needed, they'd have it.
And point 2 guidance counselors at, I believe it was the middle school?
Correct.
We don't have a full-time guidance counselor?
We have school adjustment counselors at our middle school. We made that shift years back, but we do have a retired guidance counselor who is supporting some extra work at the middle school, and that's the point 2.
So essentially, these adjustment counselors are taking the role of a guidance counselor?
They do counseling work, correct. There's not a heavy role of academic guidance at our middle school. The high school has academic guidance counselors that work with college selection and choice. At the middle school, our guidance counselors are now adjustment counselors, so they have obviously more of a therapeutic background.
And with these, with these adjustment counselors, are we seeing, are we more actively engaging to try to determine whether or not students through these additional support tiers need potentially a behavioral IEP? Like, have we seen an increase in that with those as far as being able to provide student supports, or is it just kind of a condition-based support network?
So when you use a multi-tiered system of support, part of that is to help provide supports to students so that they don't require an additional IEP, individualized educational plan, which is special education. However, when a student is not successful going through the tiered system, then you would make a referral to special education where they do hold an IEP and do some assessment and make a determination as a team whether or not that child qualifies. Southbridge does have an over-identification issue with special education, where over 26.6% of our students have been identified. So making sure that you have all the systems in place in your regular ed classrooms is a super important thing. Simply assigning an IEP is not the solution to all learning problems. That said, if that becomes what is necessary, obviously we do put children into special education.
Okay. And then I'm assuming that the reinforcement of these instructional behavioral expectations, this is part of the Wednesday planning and development extra hour that happens every Wednesday. I'm assuming this is kind of factored in as far as that review and any potential changes.
So professional development does incorporate our positive behaviors intervention supports, instructional strategies. For example, at the high school, middle school, they actually will have a teacher practicing a strategy of like calling the class to attention with other teachers in the audience pretending to be students and challenging that teacher's skill set. They get critiqued and they go back at it and practice again, and I've seen that all fall, and it's why they're very good at their craft.
Okay, and then I was looking at the behavioral tracking data, a bunch of the slide with a bunch of graphs that we were kind of rushed through here. Looking at, this data is conglomerate throughout the district, I'm presuming the way you presented it, correct?
Well, these are examples, and the blue-colored graph has a large square that's covering students' names because we can't share these data live because of FERPA privacy protections. But these are live data sets that can be manipulated by the leadership team and by teacher teams that are looking at have different questions. So the blue side is the Student Success Center data, where we track every student district-wide that's been sent to the Student Success Center. And it helps us ask various questions about why, who sent them, how long were they there, et cetera. The green side is from the Swiss system, which is the school-wide information system. And that, again, allows you to ask and answer an awful lot of questions about any type of disciplinary referral. So anytime there's a disciplinary situation, a teacher would enter a referral, either what we call minor or major referral, and those are defined based on whatever the conduct is. We can do analysis on each student, each teacher, time of day, the day of the week, the type of offense. So it gives us all this different information that teams of teachers then can ask questions about on their PBIS teams and try to create an environment that's more conducive to the positive and reduce difficulties.
Okay, so because I'm seeing, like, the only reason why I asked if it was a conglomerate was just because, 1.2 thousand records, this is going back from the beginning of the school year to that date of 11/28, 1.2 thousand just for disruptions. Kind of threw me off guard as to whether it was one school or all the schools. Personally speaking, I would love to have seen more refined data based on grade level, just to see the positive changes that you guys have made overall throughout the middle school and the high school, because they have been buildings of contention for quite some time. It's part of the reason why we're under receivership in the first place. Just seeing it all lumped together just kind of looked a little disconcerting, but definitely in the future would like to see something like that. But all in all, I think this was a very good and very informative presentation. And I would just hope that with certain points, certain minor infractions, I just hope that your instructional staff do understand that it doesn't need to be taken, followed these steps item by item, because I do believe that if they don't, it can provide the misconception from middle schoolers and high schoolers that they're being targeted, or that it's a little excessive, and our teens come to us and tell us what happened at school and we react thereafter. So I'm not saying that it isn't happening. I'm not saying that it is. I just hope that this is 100% consistently implemented throughout the middle and high school especially, because if there's any inconsistencies, I think that some of the inconsistencies that may have happened is where you have public perception being skewed away from the core principles of PBIS and these different programs that you implement. So is there a way to track teacher by teacher exactly the efficacy of their implementation of these things, so that way you can kind of weed out who's kind of referring kids to SSC more often? Like, do you guys have your own administrative metrics that you view teacher to teacher?
So we use a tool that the University of Connecticut researchers, and perhaps with another university that I don't recall, it's called a Classroom Management Observation Tool. I'm personally a part of the team that does this. We go around to classrooms throughout the district every week. So today I was at Eastford Road and West Street School, and I go into classrooms for about 10 minutes using this tool, and it's helping us monitor our classrooms positive. Are we giving behavior-specific praise? Are they actively supervising the classroom? Are students given opportunities to respond in class? Some key measures that are associated with a good positive behavior interventions and support system. And we gather that data and we share that data with leadership. It is something we've been collecting for a number of years now, and it helps us track how things are going across the district. So we'll capture the classroom, the grade level, that type of information. It's not part of our teacher evaluation system, but there's other tools, again, where our leaders will go in and they will provide teachers with observation and professional practice feedback. We capture that information as well. And again, these PBIS pieces are all integrated into what we expect from people. So they'll get professional feedback on that as well, and that becomes part of their evaluative process. So we have multiple data points that we're trying to track to see how effective this is. We have 450 employees, so we're trying to get people all to do the same thing and work together. It is a challenge. And the extent to which it's done well, we get better data. And that's why following these data is so important. That's why we've put so much time. That slide that you were referring to was shared more to show you the types of systems that we have, not the specific data on the slide. Certainly, I have shared lots of that in the past and happy to share more in the future. It's stuff that we have talked a lot about over the last 5 or 6 years.
Thank you, and just lastly, and then I promise I'll shut up from this point forward. I know, obviously, whenever you have any sort of curriculum or climate and culture program that you're trying to implement district-wide, that consistency in staffing and tenure definitely helps in proper implementation. What percentage of our current teachers right now have been with the district for more than 5 years, and where are we at as far as rookie teachers within their first year or two? Because I know we were kind of trending like 67% a couple years ago were less than 5 years of experience. So I'm just trying to see, have we been able to keep people to get them over that 5-year hump, or are we still kind of revolving door, so to speak?
I would say depends on your school, right? So like Eastford Road School has maintained its staff solid. Middle school staff is pretty solid. We've seen turnover at Charlton Street where 9 out of 13 teachers are in their first year. West Street School has a good share of new teachers. I think across the district, we probably have a good 70% of our teachers with 3 or 4 years experience at most. So teacher retention is an issue for us. It's also now been really exasperated post-pandemic, not just for us. You'll see across the Commonwealth now people are busily hiring folks, poaching from districts left and right. So we are in a high level of competition for employees at this point. But key are, once our building's stabilized with a leader that's strong, that works well with the staff, we seem to be able to retain folks there. It's a critical component.
Thank you.
Erin?
I just wanted to start by saying that I really appreciate you, Dr. Villar, for coming and making this presentation, as well as Mr. House and Dr. Williamson. And I feel like one of the reasons that I'm really thankful for our meeting tonight is that I feel like it has, in some measure, it shows a little tiny bit of almost what looks like functionality with our school committee here, because I feel like we saw a need within the community. There were people who came to the school committee and were concerned about the discipline in the high school, or whatever, positive behaviors in the high school, and all of those things. And then there were members of the committee that expressed a desire to be able to have a discussion like this. And then we went to you and you kind of suggested, hey, how about if we do an actual presentation on it instead of just discussing without actual statistics and information. And here we are actually having the meeting and trying to address some of the concerns that were presented by the community. So I feel like that's kind of what we're here for, and it's nice to be able to actually, to some extent, do our job and feel like we can be a way for the community to have some of their concerns at least looked at and heard, and hopefully addressed, which you already are addressing them, but at least discussed on a level that people can see and people in the community can be a little bit more aware, I guess, of what's going on in the school. So I really appreciate that. I also feel like I really appreciate the fact that, I mean, this sounds really basic, but we had this last Friday, and that's great, you know, for us to be able to look at things ahead of time and feel like we can know what's going on and have the ability to be involved on an even more informed level is really encouraging. So thank you for making that happen. I wondered if you might be able to give us, and this is just really an opinion, and maybe Mr. House can address this even more specifically. It seemed like right at the beginning of the year, there was a big, I don't know if you want to call it learning curve, as some some things were being implemented that had not been previously consistently implemented, and it seemed like there was a pretty big reaction, if you will, from students at the high school. And I was just wondering if you feel like that's settling down a little bit, or what your opinion is on that.
Sure, I'll start, and if Mr. House has anything to add, we'll certainly let him add. Last spring, we had a lot of conversation about our high school as a community. We weren't happy where we were. We revamped the leadership team at the high school over the summer. We brought on additional people. We trained, Dr. House did the heavy lifting of the training of the staff, established similar procedures and routines that we had seen effective at our middle school, began to train staff and started school. Mr. House and his team have done a really good job of trying to be consistent, trying to provide the training and feedback to the staff so that we can provide a consistent environment for students. Truth be told, I'm a former high school teacher myself, a middle school teacher. Secondary kids, the older they get, obviously they fully understand the levers of resistance in a sense. Kids are like water. You put them in a bucket, they'll find any leak you have, and so they test the system. Our high school, secondary schools for years were sources of concern and discussion about different events happening. And when I first got here, it was the middle school primarily that took the center light there. But people were worried about it and concerned about it and talking about it. And so things improved there, and now we're bringing it to the high school. Our expectation is these schools are going to not only improve in their environment, but improve in the outcomes for all the kids. So this is that first step. And yeah, there's definite resistance and people a little bit shocked that you couldn't have your phone in class. I have to tell you, over the years, I've walked into classrooms in our high school and kids are watching Netflix. That's not acceptable. I can tell you, I've not seen phones in classrooms for a very long time at our secondary school. It's a really good thing, and it's a challenge. If you go out and ask folks who are teaching kids in any other communities, they're all struggling with high school, middle school age kids with cell phones. And what are they going to do about it? Well, the consistency of the enforcement of the policy has made a huge difference. And giving the kids some freedom to use them in the hallways at the high school makes a lot of sense. These aren't, they're not little babies anymore, they're young adults. So trying to teach them the right time to use them and when, and being consistent, it is making a difference. But yeah, that first day was a shock for everybody, right? Like, what? My personal preference would be to have no suspensions. Like, that'd be great. But also, more important is to have a school that's safe and have a school that's conducive to learning, right? That has to be. And so that's the first big step. And then the next step is building on that in the academic environment and all the culture that's happening at our middle school now with kids being recognized in the creation of a National Junior Honor Society and bringing back all those great experiences. That's what a robust education is about, and we're really starting to see it. So early stages. We anticipated some sharpness in the first few weeks of school. I will tell you, looking at data on referrals, they are slowly dropping, and that is typical. Every year in a PBIS environment, reteach expectations, keep going over things, and you'll see graphs, they tend to drop down. When we get into the new year, after January, things tend to go up towards March. And so there are real historical patterns that can be seen, and you can start to get ahead of it. But I do think, I know, from weekly visits in the high school, it is an improved place already. It's not where I want it to be, but it is so much better just by having everyone on the same page. It's making a difference. Mr. House, I don't know if there's anything you want to add? Or
Sure. So, yeah, I would just share that, yes, the short answer is yes, I think it is definitely getting better. I think that just something I learned, in the experience of being at the middle school is like the good things that are happening, math scores, reading levels going up, suspensions going way down, student attendance coming up, the positive environment rating in the classrooms going up, like those things go hand in hand with just creating safety in the school. So I think that I never want to talk badly about our schools, because I think that, like I said, the Southbridge community has great kids. This is a great community. I love working here. I'm proud to work here. But there were some things that were happening in the high school that weren't safe, last year. And like Dr. Villar said, like, especially since the pandemic, suspensions are up everywhere. Mental health issues with teenagers are up everywhere. Discipline issues in schools are generally up. And we're proud that, like, in the same period in the middle school, we were able to help it come down, but it takes a lot of work. So, I mean, in the high school, some of the things that the students were suspended for, have been fighting, threatening school staff, bringing drugs or controlled substances into the school, or a weapon into the school. And these things are just, these are, even good kids sometimes make wrong choices. We want to work with these kids and help them be successful, but we also got to keep the school safe. It's first and foremost about keeping our students safe. Like, our students need to be in a school where there's nothing unsafe in that school. They can let their guard down, focus on learning, and just reach their full potential. But then it also, I think, ties in with what Mr. Murch was talking about with the relationships and the continuity that's built in the school when you retain staff. And, frankly, a little bit sadly, but truly, when I began to work with the high school, it was somewhat difficult sometimes to hire staff or recruit staff to come to the high school. There was a perception of a very unsafe place. And some of it was, while some of these things were happening in the school, I never felt unsafe walking in the high school or walking in classrooms. We have good kids, but, this year we're really proud when we did our quarter one survey. Over 90% of the staff said they feel safe in the school. And so that's in it. We've had far fewer staff resign or leave the school. We're much more fully staffed in all our academic departments. So creating a safe school, it just begins to snowball in a positive direction. So like Dr. Villar said, we're never going to feel good about it or be happy until suspensions are a very, very rare event. But I believe that's the direction. The data say that's the direction we're going, and I believe we'll have some of the same really positive results with creating a safer school. Ends up being a better school where students can thrive, we can retain staff, and just be proud of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Carla?
I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Villar, for being here and for doing this, and also nice meeting both of you. Thanks for being here as well. Andrew actually took some of my questions, so I'm happy I wasn't the only one. But the one thing, well, I guess it's more of a comment that I had to say was that will the Director of Special Education be here in the near future just to discuss, because I know there's been improvements, but I don't know if the community knows that. And a lot of the parents that have reached out to me, it's always about special education and what's being done or what's not being done. And I wonder if it would be good for them to be here and provide data on how it was, where we're standing right now, and what are the future plans to make improvements with the special education.
Well, that's, different topic that we certainly can broach at some point. I will say that special education directorships is a difficult job because we do hear of all the families that are having conflict with the district, and part of their job is to be a gatekeeper on resources, right? So in special ed, it's an interesting balance. There's sometimes families who are very, very upset that you're suggesting their child should be identified for having special needs and going into a special education program. Or at times you have families who are advocating strongly that you're not giving them enough services, and therefore why aren't you giving A, B, and C to my child? And the law actually says that school districts are responsible for special education services, and they kind of use a metaphor like a Chevy versus a Cadillac, right? So you're responsible to give the Chevy, not the Cadillac. And so a special ed director is constantly trying to balance the needs of this child, the demands of a family, and the economic reality of a school district You know, to put things in the context, we have a student that cost us $500,000, one student, right? They obviously need it, and therefore they have it. But you have to keep constraints on all of this. So everywhere I've ever been, there's always a lot of contention around that situation. But I think in a larger, broader topic, yeah, special education is a pretty complicated, highly regulated system. And certainly something we can speak to at some point in the future, for sure.
And who are the graduation coaches? 'Cause
We just created a position for graduation coach at the high school. Mr. House, you want to speak to that, the vision of that?
Sure. So one thing that we discovered or we uncovered or delved into this year at the high school is we have students who are at risk of dropping out because they're getting up in age, either close to 18 or over 18, and still don't have the credits to graduate. So we know it's kind of like time is running out for those students. We really need to support them to graduate as soon as possible before they become frustrated and drop out. So we created a position of graduation coach. Our graduation coach, Mr. Figueroa, is a great guy. He's been a great addition to the staff. His job is to just work specifically with a group of students that we really want to make sure graduate this year and that need maybe some extra support and mentoring to do so. And so he works with them in different ways. He meets with them once a week. They have a graduation contract they sign with him that's like, just makes very clear these are the classes you need to pass to get the credits that you need to graduate on time. In some cases, we'll make flexible arrangements if we can. Some of our students need credits to graduate, but they don't need a full course load's worth of credit to graduate. So we were able to condense some student schedules so that they can work a job, which some of them need to do, or want to do, or both. So they can still work their job, but get the credits they need to graduate. It just allows us to give more individualized attention to that group of students. It's definitely a role, like Dr. Villar said, the financial constraints are sometimes one of the hardest parts. I wish we could have 2 graduation coaches, 3 graduation coaches, but at least we have a graduation coach. And hopefully, I know it's going to help some kids, and hopefully a lot of kids graduate this year.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make one last comment, and I know at one point we had some students and parents and things who had come and were concerned again about discipline in the high school, and that's one of the things that brought that to our attention. But one thing I just wanted to say really to students and parents is that one of the concerns that we heard was respect, and that the students were wanting to make sure that they were respected. And I think that is a concern on part of the teachers as well, that we do want to respect students. And I think we saw that in this plan, that if students are not following the guidelines, that they are supposed to be talked to privately whenever possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but that is in there. And I just wanted to encourage both parents and students to remember that part of being respected is to be giving respect to teachers, to administrators, to really everybody at the school, and that the more the students are giving respect, the more that they will be likely to get respect. And I know that's not a hard and fast rule. It's not like if you give respect, you will always get it in return. Or if you're not being respected, it must be because you didn't respect people. It's not quite like that, but that in general, in order for the students to be respected the way that they would like to be respected, I just would love to encourage them to make sure that they're showing the kind of respect both to their classmates and to their teachers that they would like to be getting in return. And I'm sure that the school is already saying that, so I'm sure I'm not the only one making that comment. But just even as they're addressing concerns, or even if they come to us and share concerns, to be really careful in in what they say about their teachers and what they say about administrators, how they use people's names, claims that you make that may or may not be supported or whatever, just to be really careful that we're being respectful of the people around us. So that's it.
Any other questions from the board? Do I have any questions from the audience? Counselor?
Thank you. Jasmine Rivas, 40 Roger Street. Thank you all for that presentation. There's a lot of information. I have a couple of questions. One of the slides under classroom management and the section where it says under consistency, where 100% of students are expected to meet the standards without exception unless it's part of a specific behavior plan. I just wanted to have you speak on how that approach is modified when there is a specific behavior plan that includes exceptions. So how is that worked out? And then I have a couple other questions.
So depending on, students may have a behavior management plan because they're on a 504 plan, which is often for a medical disability requiring adaptations in the school and classroom for them to be successful, or a student on an individualized education plan, and they may have a specific behavior plan that needs to be followed. Those plans are communicated to the teachers who have those students, and those teachers are expected to read and follow the plan. So plans are written understanding how the school works, and so it should be written in a way that conforms and can be supportive of that child within that system, and the teacher then needs to follow the plan. For example, it might require preferential seating. Child has to sit to the front. There may be, a child may have a certain signal that they get to use if they need to, leave the room for some anxiety-based situation. There's a gazillion different formats this could take, and it's up to the teacher to work with often either the special education teacher or either a member of administration or an adjustment counselor to make sure that they adhere to the plan. There have been instances where miscommunication happens and then we have to redirect folks, sometimes reconvene meetings and make sure that plans either can be followed, modified if necessary. Ultimate goal is to help support kids be successful.
Yes, just a quick follow-up to that. For example, like a student that in their diagnoses has like ODR and they're going to be defiant because that's part of their, diagnosis. So how is this approach modified when the student is obviously going to be defiant?
Again, it's going to depend on that particular student. The diagnosis is not, in of itself, something that is ignored by any means in any of our schools. It would be very student-centered. That's why it's called an individualized education plan. There are different approaches that can work for different children. I don't know, Kelly, if you have any other suggestions. We have to create a plan that works for the child, and then the teachers are expected to follow it. I have witnessed many a times when kids clearly are engaged in an activity that's slightly different than everyone else in the class, and we know it's because even as a quote-unquote stranger to that class, I can, as a professional, know, okay, they're clearly on a plan. The teacher's clearly following some protocol, and trying to meet that child's needs. I guess at the end of the day, the directive is we follow IEPs, and we do our best to support every kid in our school. So I really can't get any more specific. It's going to be context dependent for sure.
My other question is around how many of the school leaders are certified in restorative practices? I know that through the SCN, there is certification. Do you have? We don't participate in certification. Okay. And then I guess I appreciate the slide with some of the stats around the suspension rates, but I didn't know if you had some specifics around subpopulations like ELL students and SPED students, just kind of aggregating how that's progressed over time. I don't know.
We do have it. I don't have it tonight. So through Swiss, what it allows you to do is to analyze your data looking for any subset of students. We look for over-identification. So, at the end of the day, you're trying to identify a risk factor associated with a group. So it could be males, it could be females, it could be black students, white students, Hispanic students, biracial students, Asian students, students on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Like we can and do look at data across all that way. Disproportionality in school discipline is a national, perhaps global situation where people look at it. For example, African American students are absolutely suspended more than any other students in America on percentage. And so there's lots of people who've been spending lots of time studying that, trying to figure it out. PBIS is an essential strategy to combat disproportionality in schools when it comes to discipline. Because of the data-driven system, the use of teams, and the analysis of the data to try to make changes, we are, in fact, seeing improvement from the district over a long period of time. There were huge percentages of Hispanic students suspended in Southbridge, and now it's down to a much smaller percentage of students than it was at that point. We have a long way to go, but it is an important piece of data as we look at it. And again, that's one of the many reasons we've invested in these data systems, is to keep working on that problem, which again is a national problem, not a Southbridge problem.
Thank you. I'd love to see that data. Oh, that was a while ago. I don't think we've met in like a year, but. And then my last question is around trauma-informed practices and de-escalation. How are leaders and teachers learning about trauma-informed practices, and how we hear a lot about student learning and PBIS and how students are tracked, but how is progress for the leaders and teachers, how is that being tracked and evaluated when it comes to implementing trauma-informed practices?
So I do not have a system that tracks leaders and teachers' trauma-informed practices yet, so that is something definitely to ponder. Again, we do look at teachers' involvement, administrators' involvement in assigning disciplinary consequences, look at the teachers who are making referrals. We have access to all of that information. And we work with the University of Connecticut in training our staff on our PBIS initiatives. Should announce that we've been selected for another 5-year period of working with the University of Connecticut, who's just received an additional federal funding, and they sought us out to continue to support our practices. We are not by any means perfect, but I do think that as a district, I would argue we probably have some of the most elaborate data systems, at least in this region, if not across our state. There are a lot of things that we're collecting, but we have complex problems. Mr. Murch pointed out, we still have staff retention issues. We're trying to recreate and restart our high school. So I'm not standing here to try to project perfection, but we certainly are making a lot of progress. And that's because of people like Mr. House, Dr. Williamson, and our teachers and our principals. They come to work every day and try real hard to make Southbridge a better place for the kids here. And so I'm proud of their work, and we'll continue to try to be as transparent as possible. I have brought these data for years to the school committee. I've presented them to subcommittees of the town council, to advisory committees. So much so I get accused of cooking the books now and then. And the numbers are what the numbers are. So we'll keep at it.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to agenda item number 8. Our next meeting date will be January 9th, 2024. Even I don't know what it is. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? How would I ask that? No one's ever opposed. Thank you very much. That was excellent. Thank you.